Well, interesting thoughts. Gentlemen, let's cap it off on the shake-up in Parliament and the different parties that have now taken over finance, among others. Let me just walk you through some of them as I have them here. So we know, for example, that Osae-Kwapong is said to have rejected that new role as ranking on the Economy Committee, chaired by an NDC MP. And the ranking on that committee now being Amapoma Boateng as put forward. Then Mines and Energy, now only the Energy Committee with no responsibility for mines, which will now be taken care of by the Committee on Lands and Natural Resources. The ranking on that committee is now Al-Hassan Suini. We spoke to him a short while earlier. Then you have Samuel Okujeto Ablakwa, chairman of the Government Assurance Committee. He used to be ranking on the Foreign Affairs Committee, as we know. And the ranking there on the Foreign Affairs Committee is now Dr. Abdul Rashid Pelpu. It goes on and on. I'll start with you, Samuel Bing. The shake-up, the relevance of the shake-up at this time in the dying embers of the 8th Parliament. How do you relate to it?
Well, first of all, it is important. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Right. First of all, it is important to note that this has come about as a result of the changes to the standing orders of Parliament, right? Parliament adopted new standing orders at the dying embers of last year, and from the beginning of this year, they've been applying these new standing orders. These standing orders require some changes to committees, the nomenclature of the committee, the functions of the committee, but also to
Samuel Bing.
And also to the issues around how many members of Parliament make up each one of these committees. And so naturally, it was expected that the Committee on Selection, which is the committee that chaired by the Right Honourable Speaker, by the Standing Orders of Parliament, that is responsible for getting the two sides to agree on who and who becomes members from their respective caucuses being on committees, get to do their work and announce new committees. So the timing, yes, it's quite interesting, but it's a requirement from the new standing orders, right? That's the first point. The second point is that these new committee arrangements is also very progressive. In fact, it is in line with modern trends so far as parliamentary practice and parliamentary work is concerned. What do I mean by that? We had an instance in the past where only the Subsidiary Legislation Committee, Public Accounts Committee, chaired by the minority in Parliament, or the party that does not form the government, in Parliament. The rest are all chaired by parties that are forming government. And we've noticed from parliamentary practice the world over that this is not very healthy for purpose of oversight, for purpose of accountability, for purpose of transparency. And so Parliament of Ghana has transformed this greatly and has introduced instances where there are specific committees that will be chaired by the party that forms the government for very good reason. Committees that are dealing with issues of national security you will understand why committees that are dealing with national security, foreign affairs, and co will be chaired by the party in government. But you'll also understand why committees like the ones that are dealing with government assurances, subsidiary legislation, public accounts committee, and the likes will be compulsorily chaired by the party or the caucus that is not forming government. And then the rest of them will be shared among the caucuses, majority, minority, in equal number or number proportionate to the numbers that they have in Parliament. So with this hang, you're almost having a 50-50 situation of committees chaired in Parliament. So that's also a very good thing. So these are the backgrounds to why this has happened. And now, of course, the numbers have also reduced. You had committees that had almost 30 members, 24, 27. It made work very, very difficult. Now it's been reduced by way of how many members can make up a committee, but also the number of committees generally have gone up because some committees were too large. They needed to be split and all of you. Some of the names that have come up and some of the fallouts, rather, for me, are the interesting aspects of this. A few weeks ago, I had indicated in one of the comments I had sent to some Sense News File program, how people like the Honorable Party as Finance Committee Chair must be protected by all of us by using our voices. Because if you saw the work that the committee was doing, and sometimes not all of these things came out in the public domain, because yes, you can understand why for political reasons some of these things must be dealt with internally. How a committee that is chaired by a member of parliament who is in the majority in the ruling party blocks tax exemptions because he as chairman, together with his other members, thinks that this is not in the best interest of the nation, right? And ask the ministry to take these things back, many of them, right? Of course, you don't expect people to be very happy with these things. And for us, this is the backstory, really, for taking people like Osae-Kwapong out of a committee of finance and saying that he's going to, work in economy. I would have been surprised if he had accepted that, by the way. You get the point.
So from where you said it was right for him to reject it.
Sorry?
So from where you said it was right for him to reject it.
Oh, absolutely. Look, we must start getting to the point where committee membership, leadership on committees does not become a tool in the hands of the leadership of caucuses to either punish people or reward people who they think are loyalists, not in the overall national interest. And we must start speaking out on things like this, in my opinion. Of course, one of the very exciting things that has happened with this shakeup is having Mr. Okudzeto-Ablakwa as chairperson of Committee on Government Assurances. We've realized how that particular committee, depending on who is leading it, can be a very useful tool or a very useless committee, and we've seen how useless it could be, in some recent past. And so, we would expect a lot from that particular committee, although it will be short-lived. They just have about 6 months, but to be able to make sure that the promises that government makes on the floor of parliament, the promises that parliamentary officials make on the floor of parliament, somebody or a committee is holding them accountable to the timelines, the deadlines, and making sure that they are living up to those expectations is also very exciting. But this entire shakeup was expected to happen because of the changes in the standing orders.
Right. Dr. John Osae-Kwapong, your take on that would be the shakeup, and that's how we're going to end.
Yeah, so I recall that when the changes to the standing orders
and Dr. John Osae-Kwapong, please hold for me. Let me let go of Samuel Bing. I know you have to move on to other things. Thank you so much for your time. We're grateful, and I wish you the best.
My pleasure always.
Right. That is Samuel Bing. He's with the Parliamentary Network Africa. Back to you, Dr. Osae-Kwapong.
Thank you very much. So I recall last year when the proposed changes to the standing orders was made public, I was very excited about it because I think we often hear this public narrative that we have a very strong executive, Parliament is weak, Parliament doesn't really check the executive as much as it can. And my counter argument was always that the executive is only as strong as Parliament makes it, right? That if Parliament would flex its muscles sometimes, that it could really, improve its oversight. So for me, the first thing for me is the prospect of greater oversight that I see. Because again, and I always go back to Afrobarometer, but if you go to Afrobarometer, you see the sentiment of Ghanaians implicitly wanting greater oversight of the executive. For example, in 2012, only 8% felt or perceived that the president often or always ignores Parliament. And then it's grown to 33% in the most recent Afrobarometer, right? So if you look at some of the committees that are now going to be chaired by the minority party in this or subsequent parliament, at least you can have some assurance that oversight of the executive will be improved. I also think that you are going to see a much stronger hand given to the minority party in the conduct of the affairs of parliament. Again, we often tend to say that the minority would have its say, but the majority would have its way. But with some of these reconfigurations, I think it would be more than just the minority having its say, but the minority would have an impactful say in the affairs, of Parliament as it works with its majority counterpart. So for me, the prospect of the greater oversight and then the prospect of a stronger hand of minority in the conduct of parliamentary affairs beyond even just this Parliament, I think it's good. Public perceptions of Parliament is not the best. If you look at the most recent Afrobarometer, it's one of the institutions with the lowest approval rating when it comes to performance. And then lowest, the perceptions of corruption is not great. Trust is low as well. So hopefully this shakeup, as time progresses, would help improve how Ghanaian citizens have come to perceive the Parliament as an institution. Real quick, the one challenge, though, that I foresee would always be, the issue of partisanship. When the hand of the minority is strengthened, I think one of the things that you have to keep in mind is that in their eagerness to hold the executive accountable, which is from a different political party, that there is not an overreach, right? You have to walk that fine line between holding the executive accountable, ensuring greater oversight, and not overreaching in such a way that it can potentially cause political gridlock. Because once the majority starts to sense that on some of these committees that are now being chaired by members of the minority, and they sense that overreach, they may want to then also shield, their party or the executive that is, formed by its party, and that can cause, further political gridlock. But overall, I think it is good for the institution. It would strengthen Parliament, and my hope is that it would improve public perceptions of the work that Parliament does.